thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I was listening a little bit to what you guys were doing. That was fun.
Oh yeah, we always start off with the name game. We want to find out what everybody is reading, listening, watching. And of course, we have a bonus question tied into our author. So I'm going to ask you those questions a little bit later, probably during our after hours.
All right.
But Deborah, for our readers who are new to you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first got into writing?
Yeah, so I started as an actress in film and television. I played Erica Kane's sister on All My Children. For any of you who remember All My Children, she had a crazy, bad to the bone sister, Silver. That was me. Yep. And that was my really first job, big job after college. And when I was written out of that show, I went out to California. Paramount Pictures brought me out there to do a project with the actor Christopher Lloyd, if you remember him. And I had a really nice 10-year run as an actress in film and television. It was a lot of fun and I loved it. Got married and had 2 children. And the bloom was a little bit off the rose with acting. I found myself not as enchanted by the whole thing. And I had the opportunity with my family to move to France. My first husband was an American who'd grown up in Paris. So we moved to France and it began the first real pivot into my writing career. We're now in the early 90s. And I was hired by a French film studio as a reader. They, all film studios keep readers on the payroll. It's a freelance job. So there I was in Paris with 2 small children reading manuscripts for a living and synopsizing them and giving notes to the studio heads. So we ended up moving back to New York in the mid-90s. My first husband took a job for Julia Roberts. She had a development deal at Disney. So he worked for her. And I was hired by Miramax as the story editor. So a story editor at a film company is like a book editor. And that's what I did through the 90s. And it was in many ways like my writing school. It was, a chance to really sit in that editorial chair and work with some of the greatest writers in the business and pay very close attention to what worked and what didn't work in story and structure and characters. By the early 2000s, I was divorced and remarried. It was kind of a painful passage for me. And in my new life, a couple of things happened. So I was really writing a lot on my own in writing groups. And my husband Chuck, and I did a lot of restoration projects. But our first restoration project was a cinema in Stamford, Connecticut, a beautiful 1939 cinema. And we still run it. And in the first 10 years of that project, we became very close with Gene Wilder, the actor. And in the next twist and turn of fate, he became a real encourager of my writing. He read some stuff I'd written, and every time he'd see me, he'd say, "Are you writing? I hope you're writing. You should be writing." So kind of the moment where I made the decision to get very serious from the point I'd been not so serious was in my mid-50s, that moment of the empty nest. And I thought, if I'm ever going to do this, I need to do this now. And I'm now publishing my 3rd novel, REEF ROAD. So that's kind of, you've got the whole adult life of me, more or less.
And what was it about the true crime that pulled you to this style of writing?
Well, my real mother's best friend was murdered on December the 10th, 1948. The crime that I fictionalize in REEF ROAD is very much based on that. And I do believe that if people, and it's not just my belief, I think it's a well-known syndrome, if people exist kind of next to extreme acts of violence, if someone they know has been murdered or had something else happen to them, I think it really changes people. And there's a ripple effect of those changes. And I think because of what happened to my mother, it affected her. It made her a little bit fearful at home, overprotective as a mother. My mother's still alive, and I've had to say to her, that I've made the writer and the writer's mother in the book a lot less stable than I think we are for dramatic purposes. But I think it's always percolated in my head. I've always had a consciousness of, you know what, my husband uses that term black swan events, those events that are seemingly very unlikely to happen. And I think because of this thing that happened in my mother's young life, I have a perception that I don't find things as unlikely as other people might find them. There's more in my range of possibilities of what could happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would also think, I mean, as you were going through all of your previous experiences also leading up to it, I mean, again, like you said, that was such training ground in some ways, and just seeing quite the range of stories that come about. I mean, not only from the acting and of course the various films and TV shows that you did there, but again, reading the scripts and editing those stories for Miramax to just see just a wide range, right?
Very much so. And, even thinking back, when I was a young actress, I played the woman who married Ted Bundy opposite Mark Harmon's version of Bundy. And, so that, when you play a character like that and you're thinking about what was she thinking? I mean, that's the real question. What was that woman thinking? And you delve into the psyche of another human being. And the only thing I could come up with was she didn't believe he did it. She just simply didn't believe he did it. So I made that choice and I went with it. But you do see all kinds of stories. And the one thing that's very interesting when you are in a position to receive other people's written work, you're in an editorial chair, you're in that position, it is really extraordinary, the collective unconscious that goes on. I was there in the Emma, in the whole Jane Austen days. I went to bat for that particular version of Jane Austen's Emma that we did, the one with Gwyneth Paltrow,
right?
That Doug McGrath directed, and he just died, sadly, very young. But it was weird. It was just suddenly this zeitgeist of Jane Austen scripts, or another year it might be farm stories, American farm stories. And it's sure at a certain point, somebody writes and produces something and then there's a trend. But even before that, there are ideas that are ready to come out. And I think we can tap into them if we're paying attention.
Well, and for some of, and using Emma as a great example, right? I mean, those are still classic stories that get revisited time after time after time. And so what are those elements that are so appealing to people, and being able to pull those good storytelling elements into whatever new story that you're working on?
Right, because there are only so many stories just twisted up in different ways. And in Reef Road, it's a dual narrative. So you have two stories. You have the obsessive writer, and then you have the wife. And the wife's storyline is a classic noir. It really is following all the rules of noir. And in a noir story, you better pay attention to the woman
Yes.
and what she's up to.
And what were your challenges? Because flipping back and forth between the writer where it's in first person to the wife in third, and I admit I'm halfway through the book. So literally the last line I read was, okay, and now we're about to get into where the metaphorical shit hits the metaphorical fan. And I'm like, okay, well, so that's where I'm like, okay, now I have to really pay attention. And I'm like, okay, I think I need to start flipping back through the book already. So I'm like, what did I miss getting to this of, wait, what?
So I'm going to tell you
notes.
I'll tell you a terrific edit that an editor I had in my second book gave me. She said, rewatch the movie The Sixth Sense.
Oh.
She said, nobody wants Agatha Christie anymore. They don't want a locked room mystery where here we all are and one of us drops dead and nobody knows what's going on. And suddenly some detective comes in, on page 300 something and says it was the parlor maid. And we're all left thinking, what? I never even thought of the parlor maid. She said, what they want is In The Sixth Sense, there's that moment where you realize there's the twist. You realize what is going on is not what you thought was going on. And what they do cinematically is they go back, and there's a series of very quick flashbacks where you relook at scenes you already saw, but now all of a sudden you see them completely differently with that bit of new information. So in my books, when you get to the twist, there's and you're not there yet. you are able to mentally go back and make sense of all the things. I am dropping breadcrumb trails along the way. They are there. You just don't know what they are yet.
And how are you keeping track of all of that? Because with what I've read so far, I mean, the book is alternating between these two characters and their story. So how much of that did you write all at once with one viewpoint and go back to the other? And were you using post-it notes? I mean, to make sure that you've got all of those different links.
So I write in the order you read it, and I'm trying to find a little trick I use. One of the things I do, and this is a book I'm working in now, I print out, can you see? Yes. This is a month at a page of a calendar. And I go along and I put these little notes in. So let's say you have, in my first book, there's this necklace. I've got this book here. See the necklace? It's this weird question mark necklace. So there's a point after which you cannot see that necklace. And the first book is nonlinear in two very different time periods, and it's nonlinear twice. So let's say there's a date, July the 5th, which is the last moment you can see that necklace before whatever's revealed about the necklace is revealed. So doing those little calendar pages, it is so helpful. And I'm friends with Annabelle Monahan. I don't know if you know Annabelle. She just posted about my trick today. She said it's changing her life. So I'm very analog. I'm very old fashioned. I do write on a computer, but when you lay out those calendar pages and you make little notes on different dates, it is very clarifying. You don't have to go back on your computer and try to figure out what was the date, you know, that the necklace disappeared. It was not difficult going back and forth. I wrote it in the order you read it by having the writer's voice in first person and the wife's voice in third person close. It was very clarifying for me. And I think because I was on a soap opera, I'm a great lover of the cliffhanger. So I have short chapters, but I love having, you know, the metaphorical shit hitting the metaphorical fan. And then it leads into something very directly in the next voice. So I love those transitions. I think it keeps a reader reading and it keeps the pacing very controlled.
Mm-hmm. Just the organization for that is always so impressive, and figuring out, well, how our authors are getting into that different headspace as you're having to move back and forth.
Yeah. And for me, I have to have good chunks of time that I'm writing. Like I can't sit and write for half an hour. It's just not enough time. I can write other things, certainly if I have to write an essay or something, but it's not enough time to really get in the headspace to get all that organized. And I usually write at a big table and I lay things out. I'm very visual that way. Mm-hmm. And I have these trolleys, they're over there. You know, those rolling like garage trolleys where you can stack your boxes?
Oh, yes.
And I fan papers out. I deal with a lot of, I like paper. I like to look at things because I think sometimes with your computer, and I love my computer, you have to consciously go looking for something. Mm-hmm. But if you have things spread out, your eye can land on something that you don't know you're looking for.
Sounds like my work desk. I've just got papers and stacks all over the place for different standards and things. I can relate on that. Do you think your history as an actress also helps you form an emotional connection with the characters that you're creating?
Very much so. I think, you know, as an actress, let's say you have to play a murderer, odds are you haven't murdered anybody. So where do you get the emotional resources to play a murderer? Well, you think about what, we all have the same toolkit of human emotions, unless we're psychopaths like Ted Bundy. So let's forget him. But the rest of us, it's the palette. It's the same palette. So you really dig into why the character is murdering somebody. And is it anger? Is it jealousy? Is it feeling of betrayal? And you decide what it is. And then you just go up or down with that feeling. And it's the same with writing characters. And it's just with each character in the book. And people ask me, well, which one is you? And I think they're all me in a way, facets of me, certainly, because I'm putting me into whichever character I'm writing, or at least my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do want to touch a little bit on your acting. And essentially, what is it like to have been part of such, okay, to me, iconic, because this was the era I grew up in. So yes, I did see you as Silver Kane and all the storylines with Erica, but also as when you were the girlfriend or the girl everybody wanted in Just One of the Guys. Again, it's one of those movies I've seen a lot. So.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have people who still contact you on those? I mean,
I do. So funny. I did a podcast last year with Jenny Garth and Tori Spelling called 90210 OMG. And they were,
because you were on 90210, right?
I was, and I was on an episode called Party Fish. So we did a podcast about that. And I've gone to one convention, you've heard of Comic-Con or ThrillerCon. So I went to one of those, and it blew my mind so much. I called my husband. So I was in New Jersey for this thing, and we live in Connecticut. And I said, you have to get in the car now. Get in the car now. You have to come here, because people come, it's such a different thing. As an author, you will really do anything. You will show up anywhere. And you go to these conventions and they're just giving you money for everything. Like, here's $40 for this, $100 for that, this picture, that picture. And you sit next to a handler who has this money pouch. And every once in a while, the handler opens the pouch and shows you these rubber banded wads. And she's like, all of those are $1,000. I'm like, this is just the craziest thing I've ever seen. I would take my picture with you for free. So it was fascinating. And I did that last year. And people came. What was really weird, I said, you really have to put 2 pictures behind me, then and now, because I don't want people walking around and saying, who is this woman? Who is she? What does she have to do with anything? Because I'm significantly older. But it was really touching, because people had saved posters from different movies, like Just One of the Guys, like April Fool's Day, where they had gotten signatures of everybody but me. And, they were waiting for the last signature. Or people had memorabilia from all my children, old books or a record or these odd things. So it was very gratifying. I don't know if I could handle going to one of those all the time. It's very overwhelming. Mm-hmm. There's a strange sense of unreality, although that $40 is really nice. The money back.
Understandable, definitely. And I will admit, I do have an All My Children book, because I watched that all growing up until it went off the air. And so the fact that you were part of that Kane family, it's like, whoa.
Crazy family.
Well, Deborah, I want to switch over to what we call our fresh fiction facts. Now, these are a series of quick type questions and kind of what comes to the top of your mind, meant to be simple, but I warn you, sometimes we do stump people on them, okay?
Okay.
What is your favorite genre to read?
Oh, I'm going to say literary fiction.
Who was your first book boyfriend or girlfriend?
Oh, Mr. Rochester.
Oh, okay. It's a good one. What is one luxury item or unnecessary product that you absolutely cannot live without?
Luxury item or unnecessary product that I can't live without. Well, slippers. I have to show you. I got this color UGG slipper.
I love
I'm
those.
like a slipper person. You don't need them, but I like slippers.
And I always love the one that had like the fur, like just there around the cuff there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. To me, those are the best kinds of
I'm
slippers.
so happy with my
Right?
feet right now. Yes.
How do you celebrate a new release?
Quietly. Because it's always sort of a contemplative moment, those moments of achievement where you feel both the joy and kind of that weepy gratitude that you got to that point. So I always have to have a quiet moment and try to absorb that it's happening again.
Mm-hmm. What is the most unexpected piece of advice that you've ever received?
Well, the best piece of advice I ever got was from a Texan, a woman who was a friend for many years till she died. And I was talking to her about all these issues with my teenagers at the time. She said, "Darling, stay firm, but don't take it personally." And I thought, darn, I've been doing it backwards. I've been waffling and taking everything personally. So I've tried to hold on to that ever since she said it.
Okay. That's good advice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Firm and don't take it personal.
Mm-hmm.
What is one thing that can instantly pull you out of a story, either a book or a movie?
Oh, something that is happening in it that can pull me out of it. Well, any kind of mistake. I was reading a book recently where somebody, it just wasn't, they didn't catch it in an edit. One character handed another character a certain object and another thing was handed back and it was meant to be the same thing. Or that crazy moment, I don't know if you watched Game of Thrones. I never watched any of it until I got bronchitis in March of 2019. And I watched the whole thing in a month, like my eyes were coming out of my head. And when remember when the coffee cup was there?
Yes.
But I actually made it much better. I thought, oh my God, I know what's happening. It's a total game. They're going to pull back and they're all going to be standing around with coffee cups because it is a game and they didn't go there. And I thought, oh, that would have made it better.
Like that one movie, what is it? Cabin in the Woods, where it's all supposed to be a horror movie. And then there's a twist and you're like, oh, it's not the classic. And it's like you said, it's kind of a whole, I'll call it a game.
Exactly.
Study different things. So yeah, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, now this one I'm curious about because you've done so many different things, but if you couldn't be a writer, what would you do?
I would either like to paint or play the piano well.
Oh, wow.
And I don't do either.
Hey, those are hobbies that you could pick up.
I don't know. I don't know.
In all your spare time, right?
Yeah.
What book world, yours or somebody else's, would you want to step into?
I would want to step into Nancy Mitford's world In Pursuit of Love and Love in a Cold Climate. That sort of English aristocratic families in big houses between the war and everybody being witty and funny at all times.
Let's see. Okay, another one I'm curious with your background. What is the most terrible movie that you legitimately enjoy watching and could watch over and over?
Terrible movie. Oh gosh.
Yeah, we're not looking at the award winners here, right?
Oh gosh. What terrible movie could I enjoy watching over and over? Because I do repeat watch movies, but I wouldn't say any of them are terrible. Well, But it's not terrible. Going back to Gene Wilder, I've watched Young Frankenstein so many times I could act it out. But that's a wonderful movie. But that's an example.
And is it different watching that because you knew Gene personally?
Eventually,
Mm-hmm.
but I watched it many, many times before I knew him.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually.
What's the one thing on your to-do list that you keep moving out and moving out and moving out?
What is one thing on my to-do list that I keep moving out? Well, I'd like to go back to India. I haven't been to India in a long time, and I love India, and I keep pushing that farther out.
Mm-hmm. What do you own a ridiculous amount of?
I'm not so much a shoe girl. What do I own a ridiculous amount of? Books. I own a lot of books. We have stacks.
We can definitely relate to. Well, what is it that you're reading right now? And is there anything that you would recommend to our readers?
Yeah, so I've been reading a few things. I'm reading Marie Benedict's The Mitford Affair, because I am a Nancy Mitford nut, and she's written a really fun historical fiction book that just came out about the Mitford sisters. Mm-hmm. I also just read, which I'd never read, Charming Billy by Alice McDermott, which won the Pulitzer Prize. It's a gorgeous book about an alcoholic uncle in a family. And it's just this very tender look at a person with addiction, and a really loving and tender and funny look at a person like that, not sort of as the addiction, but as the real person. It's just a beautiful book. So those are two things right now.
Who would you most want to be stuck in an elevator with, and why?
I'm going to say living or dead?
Living or dead.
Could be anybody right now. Oh, I would like to get stuck in an elevator with Queen Elizabeth right now. Get her take on all this. Two, the one who just died. I'd like to get her take on everything that's going on. Stuck in that elevator.
And get the real truth, right?
Well, if you could. Ever. I don't know if you could.
Did you pick up any hobbies or new interests during the pandemic?
Well, I was not baking banana bread. I was here in this house. I'm actually in Florida. My daughter was baking the banana bread. I ate plenty of banana bread. I mean, that seemed to be the COVID thing. Well, one of the things I was doing was riding a bike every day around, because I'm here in Palm Beach, and I was riding a bike up and down the island of Palm Beach. And that was really actually very helpful to the book. So I'm going to say bike riding.
Who is your dream writer collaboration? Because you partnered with other writers before on projects.
Yeah, right? On a screenplay. I partnered with another writer on a screenplay. That's not my favorite way to write. I like more the cone of silence, all alone writing.
Okay. And what is your favorite distraction when you're avoiding writing?
Unfortunately, to my great shame, it would be going and getting the phone and looking at social media, which is a terrible thing to say, just terrible.
Sadly, I've added on an app where it tells me exactly how much time I'm now spending on my phone.
That's good.
Thinking that would help me, and it just makes me feel worse. Because it's like, did I really spend that much time? Crazy. Well, Deborah, what is the best way for our readers to keep in touch with you and find out what you're working on next?
So I'm very active on Instagram, and my Instagram is Deborah Goodrich Royce Official. And I also have a website, deborahgoodrichroyce.com, and those are really the best ways.
And are you writing on some new project right now?
Why, yes, I am. And I'll tell you, I got a very interesting email last year from a fellow who began by saying, remember me? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's see. Tell me a little more. He said, I was your best boy on Survival Game. Now, that sounds like a strange sentence, but a best boy is the head electrician in a movie. And Survival Game is a movie I did with a guy called Mike Norris. He is the son of the action actor Chuck Norris. So it's like, okay, I did that movie. That makes sense. I still don't remember him. And he said next, do you remember that Thanksgiving dinner we had together? You were the only actress who didn't have anybody visit her on the set. And I'm like, well, no, I don't remember having Thanksgiving dinner with you. And it's starting to feel a little weird. And he went on to say, do you remember when we ran into each other at the Cannes Film Festival and you were holding a baby? And I wondered for a minute if that baby could be mine, but I knew it wasn't possible. And I was like,
whoa.
I really hope that wasn't possible, because we didn't have that nature of a relationship, because I don't remember you. But it was a fabulous email because it got me thinking about a character, a woman who probably has a flawed memory. And she's contacted by somebody who knows a series of facts about her. And maybe he's telling the truth, but maybe he's not. So I'm calling it Best Boy, and I'm about 100 pages in.
Okay. And when do you think we should be on the lookout for that?
I don't know. I'm on such a heavy book tour right now, So my books have been coming out about every 2 years, but I don't know if this will be quite 2 years after. So I don't know.
Well, we will follow you on the other social media sites and keep an eye out for it then.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, Deborah, thanks so much for joining us this evening and taking some time out of your night and other activities. And we'll stick around for our happy hour after party with our other readers.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.